My name is Daniel Rains, and I was still stationed deep in the Afghan desert when everything I thought I knew about my life collapsed. It was just another scorching, dust-blown afternoon, the kind where the silence hums like a warning. I'd stepped into the communications tent expecting to see routine updates, maybe some supply chain reports or notes from command. But what I found waiting in my inbox was something else entirely. The subject line read, "Let's be adults about this." I remember that line more clearly than any I've ever read in a mission brief. The body of the email was short, cold. 3 sentences, no emotion, just facts laid out with surgical detachment. My 13-year marriage was over. My wife, Lisa, had already filed the paperwork. She had already drained our joint accounts. And she had already moved her new boyfriend, a man named Greg, into our home back in Washington State. No warning, no conversation, just a clean digital cut. I read it twice, slowly, closed the laptop, got up, walked to the communal showers, and rinsed off the sweat and sand. I didn't speak a word to anyone, didn't scream, didn't break down. I went back to my post like nothing had happened. That night, lying in my bunk, I opened my laptop one last time and typed a single word in reply. Understood. Because I'm not the kind of man who begs. I don't threaten, and I sure as hell don't lose my footing without a plan to recover. I've been trained for war, prepared for chaos. But this was something else entirely. This wasn't the end of a marriage. It was the beginning of a different kind of war. One fought in silence, with strategy, and with precision. Absolutely. Here's the continuation. I didn't talk about it. Not with my bunkmates, not with command, not even with my own reflection in the mirror. But something inside me had shifted. As I lay on my cot that night, staring at the steel ceiling above, the pieces started connecting in my mind. Looking back, I could see the signs. Subtle at first, like hairline fractures in a window you don't notice until it shatters. 6 months before deployment, Lisa started changing. Little things. She stopped asking about my day. She was suddenly too tired to talk at night, even when I was home. She began working late at the front desk of the dental clinic, where she answered phones. Though, strangely, she never seemed stressed. Claimed she was hitting the gym 3 times a week, but the workout clothes were always too clean. New outfits started appearing in her closet. Brands we didn't normally buy. New friends, too. Friends I never met. And new passwords. Locked phones. Changed logins. Her world was shifting, and I was being left outside the door. But I didn't confront her. I've never been the type to fly off the handle or snoop through messages. I'd been trained to observe, to listen to instinct. So that's what I did. I started making quiet moves of my own. I opened a storage unit on the other side of town, moved important documents, our marriage certificate, my military paperwork, the deed to the house. Technically, the home was under my name thanks to the military loan. I just never told Lisa that. I moved my grandfather's watch there too, and my late mother's silver. Then I opened a separate bank account at a different institution, diverted a fraction of my pay, just enough to be safe, not enough to trigger suspicion. I wasn't planning for divorce. I was preparing for survival, and I didn't even know it yet. Certainly. Here's the next part of the story. 2 weeks after Lisa's cold farewell landed in my inbox, the situation escalated. I was in the mess tent when my phone buzzed with a push notification from the bank. At first, I thought it was routine, maybe a direct deposit or low balance alert. But when I opened the app, I felt the air drain from my lungs. There had been a withdrawal, $88,500, gone in a single transaction. I blinked, refreshed the screen, still there. Nearly everything left in our joint account had vanished overnight. What had once been years of shared savings, emergency funds, and sacrifice was reduced to a pathetic $22.37. I checked our separate savings. Gone. All $47,000 we'd built up for our future had been drained like someone pulling the plug on our life. I set my fork down, walked outside into the harsh desert light, shielding my eyes from the sun, though it was nothing compared to the burn in my chest. From a quiet corner of the base's phone center, I made the call to our bank, identified myself, confirmed the account. The woman on the other end hesitated after pulling up the activity. "I'm showing multiple transfers," she said. "Started small, but they increased steadily. The larger withdrawals began the day after you deployed." The timeline hit me like a sucker punch. The day after I left, that was when she'd started gutting our future, one transfer at a time, without a word, without hesitation. I hung up and leaned against the wall, staring out over the base as life went on, men laughing, others on calls with wives or kids. I felt like I was watching a normal world through glass, unable to touch it. My world, it was already gone, and something inside me had begun to harden. Of course, here's the next section. That night, sleep wouldn't come. My body was exhausted, but my mind was running combat drills of its own. I reached for my laptop, not to check email, but to log in to something Lisa had probably forgotten I still had access to. Our home security system. The feed loaded slowly over the base Wi-Fi. At first, the camera outside our front porch showed only the familiar shape of our house. It looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. Then I saw it. A pickup truck I didn't recognize parked in the driveway. The timestamp was from just a few hours earlier. A man, tall, broad shoulders, scruffy, stepped out. He had a leash in one hand, my dog on the other end. My dog. He walked inside carrying my coffee mug, wearing my favorite team's sweatshirt, moving with the confidence of someone who believed he belonged there. Then came the worst part. From the kitchen camera, I saw Lisa, smiling, laughing, pouring coffee. Standing in the kitchen I had spent 2 weeks renovating by hand during my last leave. I watched as she leaned in to kiss him, this stranger, before they disappeared down the hallway together. It wasn't just betrayal, it was erasure. She hadn't just left me, she'd replaced me, rewritten the script of our lives with another man playing my part. And I was watching it unfold in real time, 10 time zones away. But even then, I didn't rage, didn't scream. I closed the laptop and pulled out my notebook, wrote 3 words at the top of the page: gather everything. Now, because in that moment, something cold, clear, and deeply focused settled inside me. This wasn't heartbreak anymore. This was war. Absolutely. Here's the next part. The next morning, before the first rays of sun touched the dust outside our barracks, I was already wide awake, running through scenarios in my mind. Not emotional ones, strategic ones. When everything you counted on vanishes without warning, instinct tells you to act fast. But training? Training teaches you to act smart. So I made a list. First, I wrote down a name, Mark, a friend from my second tour in Iraq, now a civilian attorney who specialized in military and family law. Trustworthy, discreet. I emailed him with the subject line, "Need legal help, discreet and urgent." Then I listed out every document that tied Lisa and me together: our marriage license, home deed, VA loan terms, pension plans. I had copies of most of them already secured in that storage unit across town. I reminded myself to double-check the deed. Technically, the house was under my name only. Lisa may have lived in it, but she couldn't legally sell it. Not without me. Next came the bank accounts. I needed to ensure Lisa couldn't touch the account I'd been quietly diverting my paychecks into. It wasn't much, but it was enough to survive if things escalated. I added another name to the list, my commanding officer. I'd need emergency leave. But not yet. Not until the timing was perfect. And last, I scribbled in bold letters, check pension security. It was something Lisa had once mentioned casually, asking questions about how long I had to serve before retirement benefits kicked in. At the time, I thought it was idle curiosity. Now I wasn't so sure. This wasn't about saving a marriage anymore. It was about protecting what was mine, my legacy, my future, and the parts of me Lisa hadn't managed to steal yet. Absolutely. Here's the next part. When my boots finally touched American soil 2 months later, I didn't go home. I didn't tell Lisa I was back. I checked into a budget motel under a false name just outside the city and called Mark, the lawyer I'd reached out to from overseas. We met at a roadside diner 10 miles from town, the kind with peeling menus and coffee that tastes like burnt hope. Mark slid a folder across the table without ceremony. "I found something," he said. Inside were copies of refinance documents on the house. Our house. But my signature was all over them, or rather, a version of it. My name was there, but the middle initial was wrong. The pressure and angle of the pen strokes. Office someone had tried to forge my signature, sloppily, but just good enough that a distracted bank employee might have missed it. "She pulled out $330,000 in equity," Mark said, tapping the numbers. "That kind of transaction requires both parties to sign. Your name's the only one on the VA loan, remember?" I stared at the papers, not even blinking. "She couldn't have done this alone," I muttered. "She didn't," Mark replied. "Guess who's listed as co-applicant?" I already knew the answer before he said it. "Greg, the guy in your house, Lisa's boyfriend." Mark nodded. I gritted my teeth. "So, let me get this straight. She forged my name, took out a loan against our house, then cleared out our savings and served me divorce papers, while I was still deployed?" "Busy woman," Mark said. "But it gets better." Better meant worse. Mark had started digging into Greg's background. What he found would crack this whole thing wide open and reveal that Lisa's betrayal wasn't just personal. It was criminal, certainly. Here's the next expanded section. Mark leaned back in the booth and dropped another name, Daniel Spencer, a real estate agent. The man had done several deals with Greg over the past 2 years. On paper, nothing looked unusual, but Mark had been digging, connecting dots no one else had bothered to see. "These two, Greg and Spencer, have a pattern," he explained. "They target military spouses, women who are either vulnerable during deployments or emotionally unstable during separations. 3 similar cases so far. The setup is almost identical." He laid it out for me like a combat map. Greg worms his way into a woman's life. He convinces her that her husband is unfaithful, hiding money, or preparing to leave her. Meanwhile, Spencer steps in with a ready-made solution, a quick refinance, maybe even a fast home sale. They pull out equity, funnel money through multiple accounts. And when the husband comes home, he's locked out, financially, legally, and emotionally. It wasn't just about me anymore. Lisa's betrayal had been personal, yes, but Greg's involvement? That changed everything. He wasn't just some sleazy rebound. He was a predator with a playbook, and Lisa, whether knowingly or not, had become part of his operation. "Spencer's name appears on other loan applications," Mark continued. "Always around the same kind of couples. Always while one partner is serving." I sat there, jaw tight, hands clasped. This wasn't some isolated domestic meltdown. This was an organized con, a blueprint built around the lives of people like me, men and women who serve their country while trusting their families are safe back home. I didn't know how far Lisa had gone down this road, but I knew one thing for certain. I was going to find out. Of course. Here's the next expanded section. The deeper we dug, the darker the truth became. I wasn't just dealing with infidelity or divorce. I was staring down the barrel of a calculated scheme that had already gutted my life and was now threatening to spill over into something much larger. It started with a phone call from Mark. "Greg was picked up this morning," he said, "driving your truck." That alone was enough to set my blood boiling, but it got worse. "He's got a suspended license from 2 prior DUIs, and when the cops searched the vehicle, They found prescription pads, not blank ones either. They were filled out, signed, and traced back to the dental office where Lisa works. I rubbed my face, stunned. She's been stealing prescription pads? Looks that way. Authorities are investigating. Controlled substances. That's a federal charge. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, staring at the wall. The Greg I'd seen on the security feed, smirking in my kitchen, walking my dog, playing house, wasn't just a con artist. He was reckless, dangerous, and now potentially facing criminal drug charges. And Lisa? At best, she'd been manipulated. At worst, she was an accomplice. That afternoon, I received a text from Lisa. "We need to talk. This is getting out of hand." Followed minutes later by, "I don't understand what's happening. Why is the bank saying something about fraud? Why was Greg arrested in your truck?" I stared at her words for a long time before replying with one line. "Who is Daniel Spencer?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. And finally, her response. "I don't know what you're talking about." I knew she was lying, but I also knew the noose was tightening, and she felt it. Certainly. Here's the next expanded section. The trap was set, and now all I had to do was watch it snap shut. Lisa sent one last message that night. "Please meet me at Riverfront Park tomorrow. We need to talk face to face." I didn't reply. I forwarded the message to Mark over breakfast the next morning. He shook his head slowly. "Don't go," he said. "Nothing good comes from that conversation right now. She's panicking. Let her stay, panicked." "I'm not going," I assured him. "But I do want to know what she's doing while she thinks I'm on my way." At 9:30 a.m., we parked across the street from my old house. At 9:45, right on time, Lisa came out the front door, got into her car, and drove away, likely heading to Riverfront Park for the meeting I had no intention of attending. And that's when another car pulled up. A real estate company logo was printed on the side door. I leaned forward. "That's Spencer," I said. Greg stepped outside to greet him. They shook hands, exchanged a few words, and disappeared into the house. Mark reached for the ignition. "Should we follow them?" I shook my head. "No need." From my phone, I opened the home's interior security camera feed, the very one Lisa had clearly forgotten I still had access to. On screen, Spencer was walking through the living room taking photos. Greg followed, pointing out features of the home like he owned the place. "Should list by the end of the week," Spencer said. "Got a buyer already. Cash offer as usual." "What about the husband?" Greg asked. "Lisa says he's causing trouble." Spencer waved a hand. "Military guys always make noise, but they're busy. He'll settle to make it go away." I turned to Mark. "You getting this?" He was already recording it all. "Absolutely. Here's the next section." 30 minutes after forwarding the live footage to Agent Patel at the FBI, the quiet street outside my old home erupted into action. Black SUVs with government plates rolled in silently, fanning out like a coordinated strike team. Within minutes, armed agents surrounded the property. I watched from the passenger seat as Spencer and Greg were led out in handcuffs, their smug expressions wiped clean by the reality of federal custody. Then Lisa arrived. She stepped out of her car, confusion on her face turning to visible panic as she saw the flashing lights, the agents moving in and out of the house, the boxes of files and electronics being carried down the steps. She stood on our lawn, my lawn, paralyzed, hands over her mouth. One of the agents walked over and spoke to her quietly, but she barely responded. She looked like a spectator at her own execution. My phone rang. It was Agent Patel. "We've got them on tape discussing the fraud scheme," she said. "Wire fraud, conspiracy, attempted sale under false pretenses. It's all there." "And Lisa?" I asked. There was a pause on the line. "She's distraught. We're still determining her level of involvement. That will depend on what she knew and on what you want. I looked out the window again. 13 years of marriage stood across the street, unraveling in real time. I remembered the early years, when we had nothing but each other. I remembered her arms around me when I shipped out for my first deployment. I remembered the hope in her eyes when we bought that house. But that woman was long gone. Now, I just wanted one thing. I want what's right, I said. No more, no less. Certainly. Here's the next expanded section. In the days following the arrests, the case moved quickly, much faster than I expected for something this complex. The FBI had what they needed: recordings, forged documents, stolen funds, and a pattern of transactions tied to multiple victims. Greg and Spencer were facing serious time, and the evidence was ironclad. Lisa, however, was a gray area. Agent Patel explained it carefully. She claims Greg manipulated her, that he said you were hiding assets, that you were planning to leave her penniless. She says the refinance was his idea, and she just went along. I didn't say anything at first. Part of me wanted to believe she'd been used. Another part remembered the security footage, her smiling while this man drank from my mug, wearing my clothes, walking my dog. She hadn't looked scared. She'd looked free. Then came the question, did I want to press charges against her? I sat with it for a day. In the end, I told Mark, if she gives back what she stole, signs a full confession about the forgery, forfeits any claim to the house or my pension, I'll let it go. I want to move on, but I want it done clean. Mark nodded. That's reasonable, and it keeps things out of the courtroom. Lisa agreed. She signed the confession. The house stayed in my name. She waived all rights to my military pension, and every penny she'd taken was returned. No alimony, no settlement, no second chance. The divorce was finalized 6 months to the day after I received that email in Kandahar. Let's be adults about this, she'd said. I did. I handled it like a soldier, quietly, strategically, without drama. And in the end, I walked away with exactly what I came for. The truth and everything that was rightfully mine. Absolutely. Here's the next part of the story. After everything was signed, sealed, and settled, I realized something I hadn't before. I didn't want that house anymore. It wasn't just about Lisa. It was about what the walls had seen. The laughter turned silence. The betrayal. The slow disintegration of everything I once believed was solid. That house had become a graveyard of trust, and I couldn't breathe inside it. So I sold it. The equity, now legally restored to me, became the seed for something entirely different. A small cabin outside Missoula, Montana. 2 bedrooms, 10 acres of open land. A creek running behind the property that whispered through the trees at night like a lullaby for a tired soul. No neighbors, no noise, just space. Clean, wide, honest space. I took early retirement from the Army after 20 years. That uniform had been my identity, my purpose, but I had given enough. I had survived enough. Now it was time to learn how to live on my own terms. I got a dog, a German Shepherd I named Ranger. Loyal, watchful. He followed me everywhere, like he knew I was someone who needed to rebuild in peace. I started doing carpentry for locals. Nothing fancy, just fences, furniture, repairs. Things that let me work with my hands and sleep well at night. My pension covered the rest. It was more than enough. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the next deployment or bracing for the next disappointment. I was just here, in the moment, fixing broken things, building new ones, breathing clean air. And for the first time since that email arrived in the middle of a desert war zone, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Safe, certainly. Here's the next section. It had been nearly a year since I closed that chapter, since the arrests, the divorce, and the quiet retreat into a simpler life. Most days were spent with Ranger by my side, tools in my hand, and the Montana breeze cutting through the trees like a hymn. No drama, no noise, just the silence I had earned. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived, handwritten. No return address I recognized, just a name, Karen, from Fort Worth, Texas. Her husband was in the Navy. She wrote that while he was deployed overseas, someone tried to pull a similar scam on her. False refinancing documents, pressure to sell, stories that her husband was hiding money. It sounded all too familiar, but the FBI had already been watching. My case, she said, had become the turning point. It had helped them recognize the pattern. Stop the scam before it finished. Save her home, her finances, her sanity. You don't know me, she wrote, but you saved our home. Thank you for fighting back when it would have been easier to walk away. I read the letter twice, then I pinned it to my refrigerator. Some days, when the silence felt too loud or the weight of what had happened crept back in, I'd open the fridge for a drink and see that letter. And I'd remember something good came out of all of it. I didn't set out to be a hero or expose a criminal ring. I just wanted what was mine. But sometimes, doing what's right for yourself ends up helping more people than you realize. And for once, justice didn't just happen. It happened because someone stood their ground. Absolutely. Here's the final section of the story. Time passed. Seasons changed on the mountain. Snow gave way to spring, and my days fell into a quiet rhythm. Sunrises with Ranger, wood shavings on my jeans, sawdust in the air, and dinners warmed by firelight. The chaos felt far away now, like a story that happened to someone else. Then, one night, my phone buzzed. A text from Lisa. I never meant for things to end this way. I stared at the screen for a while, letting the silence answer her. No anger, no sorrow, just nothing. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. That version of my life was gone, and I had no intention of revisiting it. A few weeks later, Mark called with an update. Greg got 8 years, he said. Fraud, conspiracy, identity theft. Spencer got 12. I nodded. There's more, Mark added. The FBI confirmed it. 11 other military families were targeted in their operation. Your case helped them crack it wide open. They're getting their money back because of you. After we hung up, I stepped out onto the porch. The sun was setting behind the pines, casting golden light over the creek. Ranger laid his head on my boot, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of what I'd lost. I felt the strength of what I'd rebuilt. I hadn't planned on being the man who brought down a fraud ring. I hadn't planned on losing my marriage in the middle of a war zone. But life doesn't care much for plans. What mattered is that I stood my ground, that I protected what I could, that I walked away with peace, and something no one could steal, a future that belonged only to me.